Support comes from ServiceNow. We're for people doing the creative work they actually want to do. That's why this ad was written and read by a real person and not AI. You know what people don't want to do? Boring, busy work. Now with AI agents built into the ServiceNow platform, you can automate millions of repetitive tasks in every corner of your business, IT, HR, and more, so your people can focus on the work that they want to do. That's putting AI agents to work for people. It's your turn. Visit servicenow.com.
Welcome to Good Morning Hospitality, your one-stop shop for the latest news, noteworthy trends, and thought-provoking discussions across the industry. From hotels and short-term rentals to all things travel and hospitality, you'll find each episode equips you with the information that you need to start your week. Join us on Good Morning Hospitality every Monday, wherever you get your podcasts.
Good morning.
Good morning. Happy Monday.
And happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there.
There we go. Happy Mother's Day. Speaking of mothers, Brandy, your mom was crushing it on the dance floor yesterday at Mother's Day.
Yeah.
What was it, like a space? Yeah, what do you call it? What was the event?
So it was just like their regular like party. But then in the morning at like 10 a.m., it was like the like a Mother's Day party. So they had like vendors said we could take like pictures. There was like massage, like little like vendor fun things. And then they had the moms like pulled them up like in the DJ booth. They were just like really like and the moms were dancing hard. There were some grandmas out there. My mom was like in the DJ booth with Stacey Poland, who's like an absolute like legend in the industry. And I just like could not like reconcile what I was seeing. She crushed it. 6 hours of straight dancing. So
imagine you guys are in her 20s, you know?
Yeah. I was gonna say you guys are definitely related. That's for sure.
I know.
Definitely the same bloodline. And
I don't
Madeline,
know
welcome.
Can handle 6 hours of straight dancing at this age, so I can only aspire to get to that level of Brandy Small.
I know.
I was just thinking the same thing. I was like, man, I don't know if I could do another 6 hour night. Probably, but need some prep. Definitely would need some prep. Madeline, welcome back to the show. How you been?
Thank you for having me.
You been good? Life, how's life in New York? Catch us up on the latest and greatest.
Life in New York is good. We're finally getting some good weather after a stream of extreme rain. And you know how it works in the city. If it's rain, if it's snow, you're still out there carrying your groceries and anything you need through those city blocks. So it's the biggest relief when the weather clears up.
100%. I love it. Well, for the listeners, if you haven't tuned in before, Madeline has joined us in the past to cover Focusrite reports, where basically you guys do these studies, you come out with all the data, you put it together, and then we discuss it on the show. That's kind of been our pattern these last couple of times, and it's been really fun to jump into the data and all the things you guys have done in the last couple of months and even last year.
Yep,
so
love
can you give us
with my fellow data nerds about the hospitality information?
Yes, we love it. And you're always chipper this time in the morning, so it's always nice to have some good early morning energy, given that you're in New York, so you got some extra time ahead of us. I would love for you to introduce this report and kind of give us a high level overview of what we're going to cover today, and then I'll leave the floor open for Michael and Brandy and myself to kind of start asking questions, and we'll let the conversation carry on. But actually, before I do that, for any of our live viewers, make sure you tune in or comment in. Tell us where you're tuning in from. I'm trying to get better at that. Our hotel crew, our Europe crew, our outdoor crew, they all do that really well with all of our live viewers, getting them to chime on in. There we go. Words are hard on live Monday mornings, but chime on in into the live broadcast. Let us know where you're tuning in from, and of course, be a part of the conversation. So, Madeline, without further ado, I'll let you take the floor.
Amazing. So today we're focusing on a report that really digs into the short-term rental guest psychology and how they are approaching their booking and choosing processes, both when it comes to those short-term rentals and also when it comes to staying in alternative accommodation sectors like hotels and how they're deciding on one thing versus another. So this is part of a bigger short-term rental research project that we do. We've had recurring short-term rental research projects here at Focusrite since I believe 2013. And this is my second one that I've been able to lead with them. And we focus on both data around hosts and property managers that I know we got some discussion about on the show in previous episodes. But this one is really about that consumer side, who the consumer is, who decides to stay in a short-term rental or doesn't, how they're making those decisions about what types of properties are good for them, and also really looking at some areas where short-term rentals maybe need to step things up to be more competitive, and thinking about the future and how this category can really position itself well, because we know that with things going mainstream with short-term rentals and also with these supply booms and the economic squeezes that we've had, it's so important to think about how to keep the properties competitive, or you can fall behind so easily.
Yeah, that's the supply boom is something that I'm waiting to see balanced out over time. And we have Jamie on once a month from AirDNA, and he's always talking about how supply is outpacing demand. But that trickles down into a unit by unit scenario. So I guess diving into some of the data from your report, what are the top couple of reasons why people do prefer short-term rentals over hotels? And has that data changed much in the past several years?
So the top reasons are ones that I think a lot of operators are cognizant of, things like having more space, having multiple bedrooms to spread things out. Better value for the money is a big one, and always incredibly important to think not just about what your price is, but what people feel like they are getting in exchange for whatever ADR they're charging. And things like access to full kitchen and laundry is also important. And I think a lot of operators are cognizant of that as well. The interesting thing is we haven't seen the reasons that people choose hotels versus short-term rental change tremendously since we last did this study in 2021, where we all know that it was a super different market. I think when I consider how the industry's growing, my concern is not so much that the consumer choice criteria for why short-term rental is good suddenly changed, but I'm more worried about other things with the transparency, the service standards, the consistency from property to property that can affect that consumer view of, will I really get these things for a good price, and will it be what I was promised or not? Because we've known for a while that things like multiple bedrooms and a kitchen are attractive, right? I don't think that's the new news to so many operators out there.
Yeah, and on that, the standards piece, it's something we've chatted on the show a number of times as well, where it's almost a call for standards. And pre-chat, Madeline, we talked about how there's a bit of a decline from the 35 under crowd from short-term rentals and into hotels. What are you seeing, and why do you think that's happening?
So the travelers who are 35 and under show some signs that their perceptions of just the general category of short-term rentals are changing somewhat for the negative. And one of the questions that we asked that's really important in our study is to ask people who had stayed in both short-term rentals and hotels in the last year, which category tends to perform better in their opinion across a range of different things. Who offers a great stay, better comfort, value for the money, better food prep areas, more attentive customer service. We go through a ton of different things that people can tell us their favorite categories for. And this is important because when somebody needs to book a property, we want to know what pops up in their head with the associations of where different categories are performing really positively, because obviously that can sway them in one way or another to search for different things at the beginning of their research and booking process. And we can see how a lot of those things break down by age, and for many categories, but some of the really important ones, like who offers the best overall value for the money for a stay, or the best overall stay as a whole, we see that the people who are least likely to stay short-term rentals are those short-term rental guests who are under 35. So we don't 100% know why this is happening. It could be things like PR cases blowing up in the social media sphere that have become very visible to those younger travelers, or it could be that they're not, like, I I spoke with my grandmother once about a time she rented a Vrbo. My grandmother knows the brand Vrbo. It's been around for a while. And that was a time where it was normal to go into a property that didn't have toilet paper or didn't have linens. And she was cleaning at the end of the stay. And she felt great about how she left the property, but it was a different ADR. It was a different time in kind of the American hospitality ecosystem. And so for her, that was a normal standard. And a lot of guests showing up today who are younger are not going to have the expectation that they'll be cleaning their own house at the end of the stay. So I think also the shift that we've had in the last few decades has also been one of the potential things that could affect those younger traveler perceptions.
That makes a ton of sense. Those viral lists of like, here's your 10 things to do before you check out. You know, take the trash out, wipe down the toilets, all the crazy things that we've seen go viral.
I'm also curious how much of it is pure, like peer, PER, I think, peer inflicted, because it's like, how many of you have seen your friend on social media who has no experience or ability to properly perform a good hospitality short-term rental experience, and you see them get on Airbnb because they thought they had the greatest idea to put their backyard up for rent or a room or some really poor house, and then they talk about how much money they're raking in with a really poor experience, and then you're just looking at that being like, oof, I would never trust, I'll just say a blank name from one of my friends friend list, David. I would never trust David to host me. I wonder if any of it's peer inflicted rather than just social media from like the bad PR. But that's just me. If I saw one of my buddies posts that they're doing Airbnb or short-term rentals, I'd probably be like, all right, definitely not staying in one of those.
And it's so interesting because maybe 10, 15 years ago, that was a ton of people who were listing on Airbnb. But I think it felt like a more experimental category. People had a different attitude towards it. And now it's not an experimental category. It's a mainstream lodging experience. And so the tolerance for that it's changed over time.
Yeah. And we have a great comment from Kate Parrish, who's tuning in on the live show, chippering in from Charleston, South Carolina. And she says, we aim to stay together with 3 other couples and 4 kids, but our Mother's Day was cut short due to Airbnb that, quote, wasn't as pictured, unquote, to put it nicely. No standards, a big disappointment. So, yeah, I think it's something that is reigning true for everybody that's tuning in and listening.
And even, Kate's from the industry. So I'd imagine, those of us that are from the industry, when my family asks me to book a place, I try to defer. Like, I don't want to be the one that chooses where to stay, because then it all falls on me. And unless I know somebody in that market and I can, I've got their number, I can call them if something's wrong. I know that their properties are well maintained. If it's a market I don't know anybody in, I don't want anything to do with being the neck to squeeze from the families or friends that are involved.
And it's such an interesting space when we talk about standards, because there's so many operators out there. It's fragmented. The operators came in with different expectations of what they would need to do to be successful in the market. So how do you change this whole culture of operators that sometimes have very different philosophies and not all of them are the most guest friendly?
I think the bad start waiting themselves out. Sorry, B, go ahead.
No, it's okay. I thought it just really interesting in the survey when you look at where hotels are really making the difference. And there's attentiveness, which makes sense. You have like an on-site staff that's going to be paying attention to you. But then the other one was other non-lodging trip aspects. And so that might be something that, if you have other amenities as part of the hotel, like there's a club or there's a beach club or, whatever it is, that might be, especially now that people are veering towards more boutique hotels and more unique experiences, like only so many places can have, only so many STRs can have so many really unique experiences like that. Whereas hotels, you have a bigger footprint and you can kind of afford to put in these more unique stays and attract those younger travelers. So I think that's kind of like an uphill battle on that front.
Yeah. And kind of to touch on both of those points, the get rich era of short-term rentals is over, and the era of professionalization, standardization, that's coming. It's not here yet. It needs to be here. But the whole, like, I'm just going to buy any property and put it on Airbnb and I'm going to get rich. It's going to be quite the opposite. You're going to get poor. You're going to lose a lot of money if you try and do that right now, especially if you have no idea what you're doing. So, when we keep seeing this supply push from the major OTAs, particularly Airbnb, it just scares me. I mean, the whole industry is going to be largely dragged down as a result. The properties that deserve the bookings aren't going to be getting them, and the properties that are brand new and get boosted because of that might give a bad experience to the guest, and then the guest reverts back into hotels.
Well, and for those hosts, like if you're just throwing any old property up on any site, like you're not going to get the clicks or the eyeballs. You're going to be on page 10 or something like that. So then you also have on another side this growing group of people that aren't seeing good revenue from the effort that they're putting in, even if it's not like, to our standards, like subpar. So the push for supply kind of brings down everybody's revenue opportunities, obviously. And I think that's creating some frustration on the hosting side as well. So yeah, I think we definitely all agree that the push for oversupply isn't great, but Airbnb is also doing something interesting where they're culling a lot of listings. So if you're not meeting their standards, you're getting just kind of like automatically wiped off, which definitely also frustrates hosts, but should, start to improve that guest experience.
Yeah, if you get a string of bad guests that's kind of out of your control, that could be bad. But back to the study, Madeline, one of the things that popped out to me, we're still struggling with regulations in a lot of markets in short-term rentals, but the average STR guest is spending more than $3,000 of tourism spend, where the average non-STR guest is spending about $2,000. So it's about a 50% increase for STR guests versus non-STR guests. What does that tell you? What does that number about?
So for context, that is the spend throughout the year, though obviously if you look at certain individual trip spends, you'll see some variance. But the main thing that I take away from that kind of spend data is that short-term rental guests, they are passionate travelers. They want to be on the road, but they're people who are also really open-minded to whatever type of accommodation is going to give them the best experience for something. So we see some really positive behavior from them in terms of how much they're traveling and how much they prioritize things like new experiences and new destinations. Also going abroad, which could be not necessarily the best news for the US-based hosts and more of good news for some of the other major markets that absorb the US travelers. But overall, it's a good thing to see from them that these are people who want to spend money. They're excited about travel and they want to look for whatever lodging property is going to give them the best experience with any given stay. But I think it's important to keep in mind also that they're open to other types of lodging as well. This is not some special kind of person who's committed to the STR category. They are just really excited to stay wherever is going to serve their needs for the given trip. So they're a great traveler to have because of the high spend and how much they're going to travel and spend in the destination when you can pull them in, but they're not going to be loyal to the short-term rental category just because they're open to it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm just going to keep going, Will and Brandy, because I love some of this data. The booking windows, Madeline, kind of surprised me, and for the viewers or the listeners that aren't able to see the data, we'll have a link in our show notes for the data. But the average booking window is basically the same for short-term rental guests and non-short-term rental guests. And that really did surprise me. I would have assumed hotels would be much higher or closer to the stay than short-term rentals, but it's kind of fascinating to see that it's almost literally perfectly aligned.
Well, one of the theories here is that it's because people don't always know at the beginning of their shopping process which type of property they're going to stay in. And we see super high comparison rates from short-term rental guests between rentals and hotels. Over 80% of people who had stayed in a short-term rental in their past 12 months of travel also had a hotel stay. Sorry, not also had a hotel stay. They were also looking at hotel options throughout the shopping process. And I believe it's 68% who had an actual hotel stay throughout the past year as well. So it's very possible that the booking and shopping windows look so similar because they come to that top of the funnel experience and they're not actually sure yet which they're going to stay in. They're kind of looking for whichever property is going to most suit their needs.
Yeah, and there's also, I mean, depending on what platform you're booking on, you're going to see those two options mixed together. So you might kind of unintentionally pick a short-term rental, especially if you're an urban operator, because it might appear very similar, or it'll just be interjected within your feed. And anecdotally, I've talked to guests who are like, I was just on, Expedia and I booked this and I didn't even realize it was an STR at the time. But this also, like, this data really confirmed, I mean, we have seen a shortening of the booking window. And so I was always, being an urban operator, obviously we have a much shorter booking window than the normal kind of see and ski. But then seeing this actually surprised me because obviously this data isn't bifurcated between urban and kind of like traditional VR. So that means everybody is seeing this, which I thought was super surprising. The 1 day or less people, booking your home the day you're going is pretty chaotic, but
yeah.
Yeah,
I do that with hotels all the time, but not at home.
No,
I'm not like,
no
hey,
way.
Tim is going on vacation tomorrow. Let's book a spot.
Yeah,
that's chaos.
To confirm, that's not common, but it is there. It's just not. It's not the norm.
7%, according to the data, 7% of guests will book
a good chunk
on the last day. But to Brandy's point, Brandy, is Romy a hotel or a short-term rental? Like a lot of that has kind of blended. Is Sonder a hotel or is it a short-term rental? So, the guests might not know the difference because the professionals also might not know the difference. It is blended up pretty well.
Well, when you can centralize operations for a set of properties by having them be really geographically the geographic proximity really helps from an operational, a turnover, a maintenance, supervision type of perspective. So I'm really curious when we think about how it's going to move forward with new developments and new builds, if we're going to have a lot of operators kind of take advantage of that apart hotel sort of model and jump on these really centralized kind of complexes of short-term rentals.
Yeah, and earlier before we went live, Michael was bringing up or Madeline, you brought up first, but Michael kind of commented in this new age traveler, like they're really looking for, I would say, more lifestyle than these corporate, as Brandy likes to say, beige boxes. So like Michael's point earlier, his dad was travel to Rome or whatever, he was staying in a Courtyard, or a Marriott, like he was in that brand versus, people our age now, they're looking for more of that lifestyle piece. And I think, going to your point, the new builds, the new properties, the new inventory that comes online is really going to be focused on more of a lifestyle focus, I would say, rather than the beige boxy type stuff. Yes, it's still going to be at play because when you're building at scale like that, obviously there's going to have to be some kind of consistency in design and, layout and floor plans and all the other things. But at the end of the day, I do know the lifestyle piece is becoming more and more front and center for the traveler, right? Like they want everything should be comfortable, price focused, and as expected as they see online, while they were able to, Instagram and send pictures to mom and dad or to, nieces and nephews across the country or whatever, right? Like they're still going to focus on that piece. And I think that's going to be pretty important for like the new inventory coming online as, everyone's kind of focusing on the word standards. It's going to get pretty flexible and gray line, I think, because everyone's going to have that quote unquote standard where it's going to be clean and as expected, but everything's going to be a little unique. Sorry to ramble, but anyways.
So one of the kind of most competitive features you can have on your listing is better ratings and reviews, right? That is in the number one position. And that kind of goes towards the whole trust component. And what we've seen in hotels, we know a 3-star hotel, what that means. We know what a 4-star hotel, what that means, 5-star, et cetera. Do you think having some sort of standards within the industry cross-platform would really help with conversions and establish a set of standards? Or do you think it's just way too fragmented to kind of pull something like that together?
It's two separate questions, right? The would it help versus is it functionally doable? I do think it would help, because I think anything you can do to really set a transparent standard for what a guest is going to get is going to help in a category like this. How functionally doable is it to execute something like that? Separate question. But I would tell you it would also make our research easier, because right now we have to have people self-identify whether they think a property is luxurious versus mid-tier. It's somewhat subjective, but we would have no data on the differences between property value if we didn't have them self-evaluate. So we always get caught in that cycle too, of even trying to understand the industry well based off of the differences between properties. And because there's no objective definition of what is a luxury short-term rental, it becomes somewhat clouded. We still see big differences in the self-identified ones, but it's not a formalized definition that's floating around out there.
And if everything is luxury, nothing is luxury. And that's kind of the thing. Everybody wants to be that category, but very few, I think, actually are.
It's subjective until you put a star rating on it, and then 4-star versus the 5-star. So yeah, it's all interesting. Is there anything else that jumped out to you, Madeline, out of the report that we failed to cover that you think would be important for the viewers to learn about?
I think what Will alluded to earlier about the importance of the lifestyle brands and the interesting look and feel it's a really interesting issue, because we see that people love short-term rentals for how unique of an experience they can get out of it. But at the same time, we also see that realistically on the market, there's a lot of places that feel like they were, decorated from the Home Goods, the TJ Maxx home decor situation. And we see from our host data also that it's only about 1 in 5 hosts who say that their unique look and feel is really what their most competitive factor is. Right now, what I heard from some of the property manager interviews is that they have trouble getting some of their homeowner partners to really invest more in those pieces. But I am optimistic that if people are willing to invest more, you'll see the return from the guests, because the anecdotal data about how much more you can make from really investing in your property decor is that it's very worthwhile, but it's just not happening yet en masse.
Yeah, I also think like market specific. So if you're in Orlando, for example, and there's, a never ending supply of large 7-bedroom homes that the whole family can go to, you kind of need those things to really pop out. That's going to really grab someone's attention. And, when everyone is relatively offering the same thing. And then it's also interesting. I mean, there are places like here in Miami, for example, that are just like very simple homes. Like they might have some of that famous Home Goods decor, but they have a perfect 5-star rating, because whatever they're advertising is what people are expecting, and they're having a great experience. And so whoever's booking that was a 5-star stay for them. And I think that's, another point where the guest education is still continuing, because some people will leave reviews based on this is the quality of the stay, like the kind of the tier is what the star review should be, like wonderful stay, 3 stars. And it's like, because they're thinking that this was a kind of like a mid-scale location, and therefore they get a mid-scale rating. So I think it's really the review process, because we're so dependent on it, because the better reviews, the more money you make, but then it's still, there's no standard for that either. So that's another component, I think, where we have a long ways to go in this industry.
Yeah, well, great point, Brandy. Great point. Well said. Madeline, I love it when you join the show. It's so fun. And for all the listeners, as Michael said, the report that we are referencing to is going to be linked in the show notes of the audio version of the podcast. So make sure you grab that. Make sure you sign up, tell the whole Focusrite team what you liked about it, questions you have, all the good stuff. And then, of course, to give us one last shameless plug before we wrap up, don't forget to stay caffeinated with Well and Good Morning Coffee. It is the #1 hospitality brand for you as an entrepreneur of hospitality and for your guests and all the above. So go to the link in the show notes as well, and there will be a special promo code for all of our GMH listeners. Anyways, Madeline, what is on the horizon for you? What events are we going to see you at? What are you guys whipping up over there at Focusrite? Let's give you a quick moment for a shameless plug.
Amazing. We're always putting out new research that's available on our site, but we have our Focusrite Europe event coming up in Barcelona, if we're going to be preppy about it, in June. And we always have our global event the week before Thanksgiving in November, where you can join us in the United States. This year, it's going to be in sunny San Diego. So if you're looking forward to connecting with people in the travel tech and distribution sectors, we would love to see you there.
We love it. We love it. Well, thank you so much for being on the show with us today. Happy Monday. I hope everyone has a great rest of the week. And like always, make sure you like and subscribe to all things Good Morning Hospitality. Tune into GMH Europe, tune into GMH Hotel, tune into Good Morning Outdoors, get your coffee, sign up for the newsletter, do all the things. Happy Monday. See you guys next week.